prepare you for this long series here. The thing is that if you take a cycle, so far so good, and you connect that, or you assimilate that, or you combine that with a slide down, what that does for you is that it's no longer a slide down, and it's no longer a cycle. What it becomes is a spiral. And that's what we're going to have in the judge stories. They're called the judge, it's called the judge cycles, and that's perfectly fine, I guess. But in fact, what the judge stories are, when considered all together, it's a spiral. And it's a downward spiral. Because I can assure you that we're going to start off in a really great place with Othniel. Othniel is wonderful. Othniel's my favorite judge. I love Othniel so much. I'm going to get weepy when I read Othniel in just a second. We start off in a really great place, and I can guarantee you by the end of Samson, who's not my favorite judge, who is in fact an idiot, stupid, horny, are there any males here who were a part of a frat in their undergrad? Okay, good. Oh. Frat, not like Jermaine, but like a frat guy. But not like Jermaine. He's good. But anyway, that's what Samson's going to be. And so by the end, we're going to be in chaos. And I can tell you that the first conclusion is going to be a story of nothing but chaos. And the second conclusion is going to be even worse. And we're going to wind up, it's just sad by the end. Sound good? So that's the way the book is organized. When you read it as a whole, which nobody ever does, but they should, because it makes a lot of sense if you read it that way. And if you don't believe me, buy the book. No, it really is true, is that it's a really thin book and it's a really cheap book. I don't know, you can get it for $12 or $15 or so. It's a really cheap book. But what I argue there, nobody else argues. So it really is original. It's cheap, and so nobody else sees it this way. So this is why you pay your tuition. Cool. Yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at the second introduction, which is the first. That is in 1:1. Let's see what we got here. After the death of Joshua, the Israelites inquired of the Lord, which is absolutely remarkable right there. They don't know what to do. They ask God. What a remarkable thing to do. Right? Something they haven't been doing so much so far. Right? So they inquire of the Lord, who's going to go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them? And the Lord said, Judah should go up. I give the land into his hand. And so what Judah does is that Judah goes to his brother Simeon. And Judah says, and when I say Judah and when I say Simeon, what I'm talking about are the tribes, right? Not the sons of Jacob. So Judah goes to his brother, tribe, Simeon, come up with me into the territory allotted to me so that we can fight against the Canaanites, and then I too will go with you to the territory allotted to you. And so Simeon went with him. Oh my God, we've got cooperation, we've got helpfulness, right? We've got compassion. We've got, and a great relationship with God. And they actually follow the directions. Lordy, this is awesome. It won't last. And then Judah went up. So there's a little vignette. So then Judah went up, and the Lord gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand. And they defeated 10,000 of them at Bezek. They came upon Adoni-Bezek at Bezek. And they fought against him and defeated the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Woo-hoo, victory, right? Then we have a little story. Adoni-Bezek ran away. Adoni-Bezek means the Lord of Bezek. And so when they come to Bezek, they find Adoni-Bezek, which is a really great place to find Adoni-Bezek because he's the king of... But anyway, he leaves. Adoni-Bezek fled, and they pursued him, and they caught him, and then they cut off his thumbs and his big toes. Strange thing to do. But you understand, but Adoni-Bezek is a very discerning guy, because he understands he understands the reason why his thumbs and his big toes were cut off. They think, Judah and Simeon just think that they do it just to humiliate him or something. But Adoni-Bezek actually understands the tragic significance of having that happen, because he said, Adoni-Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and their big toes cut off used to pick up scraps under my table. As I have done, so God has paid me back. As a person sows, that's what they reap. It's kind of the nature of tragedy. Not necessarily, it could also be comedy, depends on what you sow. But if you sow thorns and thistles, that's what you're going to get. If you sow cutting off everybody's thumbs and big toes, you're going to be careful. And they brought him back to Jerusalem and he died there. Then we have another little war thing, then the people of Judah. So we have Judah and Simeon, then the people of Judah fought against Jerusalem and took it, and they put it to the sword, and they set the city on fire. Yay, victory. Afterward, the people of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites, who lived in the hill country, and the Negev, and the lowland. Judah went against the Canaanites, who lived in Hebron, which you know where it is now, Hebron, blah, blah, blah. They went down there, the city inhabitants of Debir. And then Caleb said, so we have a little story put in there about Caleb and his daughter Aksa. I'm not going to read that. Then in 16, we have another weird little story about Hobab. Then we have another, in 17, we have another little war story, Judah. Remember, Simeon went with Judah to war at the beginning, and now Judah is going to return, so he actually keeps his word. Judah went with his brother Simeon, and they defeated the Canaanites who inhabited Zephath, devoted to destruction, and so the city was called Hormah, which means destruction. Judah took Gaza with its territory, Ashkelon with its territory, Ekron with its territory. You know where all those things are in Philistia, right? Isn't that midterm just helpful? The Lord was with Judah, and he took possession of the hill country. But he couldn't drive out the inhabitants of the plain because they had chariots of iron. This is going to be an image that we're going to use, or I'm going to use in my lectures up to this point. And we haven't used it yet, although it's happened quite a bit. What I want you to do right now, I want you to put your pencil down or something, and you just close your eyes. No, seriously. Close your eyes. What I want you to do, I want you to imagine that you're at the edge of a pond, and it's twilight. The sun has already set, but the sky is still light. You're standing at the edge of the pond, and there's no breeze. And you can see across the pond, and there are trees on the other side of the pond. And it's like so still and so quiet that like the pond is like glass. Like you can see the trees reflected in the pond just almost perfectly. Cool? You there? Cool. What I want you to do, I want you to lean down, and near your feet there's a little pebble. I want you to pick that pebble up. Lean back. I want you to toss that pebble right into the middle of the pond. Here we go. See? You notice what happens? It doesn't cause a huge uproar. It just causes a little tree. Messes up that mirror just a little bit. Nothing major, just a little ripple. Okay, you can open your eyes. For me, at least, that's exactly the way in which Hebrew storytelling very often happens. That is, we start off in a perfectly good way. And it's not something tragic that happens. It's not something overwhelming that happens. But there's a little something that's put in there that this one should uneasy. And for me at least, right there in verse 19, it makes me uneasy. Because you see, the Lord was with Judah, and he took possession of the hill country. But you know, he couldn't drive out the inhabitants of the plain because they had chariots of iron. Those chariots of iron, Yahweh's all powerful and everything, but they had chariots of iron. No, we can't take care of the chariots of iron. You see, it's just a little irony thrown in there. It's like the first like sort of salvo in that things are coming apart. Hebron was given to Caleb, as Moses had said, and he drove out from it the 3 sons of Anak. But the Benjamites didn't drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites had lived in Jerusalem among the Benjamites to this day. Then we have a little story about the house of Joseph. Goes up to a place called Luz. 27, Manasseh didn't drive out the inhabitants of Bethshean and its villages. 29, Ephraim didn't drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer. 30, Zebulun didn't drive out the inhabitants of Kitron. 31, Asher didn't drive out the inhabitants of Akko. My gosh, things started out so well, and now it's just failure, 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 failure. They just can't. If the book of Joshua is about conquest, this is about not conquest. Yeah. 33, Naphtali didn't drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh. And in fact, in 34, when we wind up with the Danites, notice it's not that the Danites don't drive out, but in fact the Amorites pressed the Danites back into the hill country, and they didn't allow them to come down into the plain. So now, it's not only that they're not making progress, in fact they're being retarded, they're being held back by the Amorites. Things started out so well with Judah and Simeon at the beginning of the chapter, and now nothing's getting done. In fact, they're actually losing land. And everybody cries at the beginning of chapter 2. Everybody cries. The angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim, and it said, I brought you up from Egypt. I brought you into the land that I promised to your ancestors, and I said, I will never, notice this is going to be important, I will never, not just for the book of Judges, but for the Old Testament, and I think for the New Testament as well, I will never break my covenant with you. For your part, don't make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land. Tear down their altars. But you haven't obeyed my command. Look what you've done. So now I say, I'm not going to drive them out from before you. They're going to become adversaries for you, and their gods are going to become a snare for you. I will never break my covenant, but look what you've done. I can't allow that to continue. And so now I'm not going to drive them out. And when the angel of the Lord spoke those words to all the Israelites, the people lifted up their voices and wept. And so they named that place Bochim, criers, weepers, or something like that. And they sacrificed to the Lord. We start off in a really great place, and notice where we get here. It's like God says, I'm never going to break my covenant with you, and yet, look what you've done. Now I can't. I won't. I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to forsake you. Horrible. Chapter 2, verse 6, second one. Oops. Second one, we have a cycle. And in fact, for this one, I think we're going to use that, the outline here. 2:6. Joshua distances the people, they leave, that whole generation goes away. And then in verse 11, 2:11, what we have is a cycle, and the cycle is laid out. The Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They worshipped the Baals. Oh, just one little thing. The name of the fertility god of Canaan is Baal. Say Baal.
Baal.
Say Baal.
Baal.
Say Baal.
Baal.
That's the reason why there are two A's, is that you make a ah. Right? So the name is Baal. Say Baal.
Baal.
The name is not Baal, because that's something you throw. It's not Baal, because that's a bunch of hay. Right? The name of the god is Baal. Okay? Cool. If I ever come to hear you preach and you say Baal, you don't want this. So anyway, the name is Baal. And it's really important. It really is. Because it makes you look not stupid. Baal? Who did you have for Old Testament? Well, Roy Heller. Oh. Then the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they worshipped the Baals. And they abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They followed other gods from among the gods of the peoples who were all around them. They bowed down to them. They provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord. They worshipped the Baal and the Astartes. So they do what's evil in the sight of the Lord. 2. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over to plunderers, who plundered them. And he sold them into the power of their enemies all around, so that they could no longer withstand their enemies. Whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them, to bring misfortune, as the Lord had warned them and sworn to them. And they were in great distress. They do evil in the sight of the Lord hands them over to their enemies. Well, 3. Then the Lord raises up judges, who delivered them out of the power of those who plundered them. But they didn't listen to the judges, they lusted after other gods, they bowed down to them. As soon as they soon turned aside from the way in which their ancestors had walked, who had obeyed the commandments of the Lord. But they didn't follow their example. Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge, and he delivered them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. Because the Lord would be moved to pity by their groaning, because of those who persecuted and oppressed them. They do evil in the sight of the Lord. God raises or sells them into the hands of their oppressors, right, their enemies. They cry out, God hears their cry, God has mercy and compassion, God raises up a deliverer who delivers them. So far so good. And then 19, but whenever the judge died, they would relapse. And they would behave worse than their ancestors. That is so important. I mean like spiritually. I mean like devotionally. And that is that when one is rescued from the hand of the oppressor and one returns to the same sin that you did before, you do not return to the same sin. Because you see, what we have here is in fact not a cycle. What we have here is a spiral. Every time you go around that little circle, you don't wind up in the same spot. It may seem like the same spot, but it's not the same spot. You wind up worse. Every time. Repentance is a dangerous thing, actually. You wind up worse and worse and worse. They behave worse than their ancestors, following other gods, worshiping them, bowing down to them. They wouldn't drop any of their practices or their stubborn ways, and so the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. He said basically the exact same thing that the angel of the Lord said in the first introduction, the second introduction, which is the first. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he said, because this people had transgressed my covenant that I commanded their ancestors and haven't obeyed my voice, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations that Joshua left when he died, in order to test Israel, whether or not they would take care to walk in the way of the Lord as their ancestors did. The Lord left those nations, not driving them out all at once, and had not handed them over to Joshua. And so, what we have in the first introduction, which is the second, we have the outline of the cycle that's going to play out throughout the judge stories. They're going to do evil in the sight of the Lord. The Lord's going to hand them over to their enemies. They're going to cry out. God's going to have compassion and raise up a judge. The judge is going to deliver Israel. The judge is going to die. They're going to do evil in the sight of the Lord. The Lord's going to hand them over to their enemies. They're going to cry out. God's going to have compassion, raise up a judge. The judge is going to deliver Israel. The judge is going to die. You know how it goes. Cool. Let's take a look at Othniel. This is in 3:7. Give some people. Othniel, Othniel, wherefore art thou, Othniel? Othniel, it really is a beautiful, beautiful story, because look at what happens here. Ready? Here we go. Othniel. This is the shortest of the judge stories. The Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, forgetting the Lord their God and worshiping the Baals and the Asherahs. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of King Cushan-Rishathaim of Aram-Naharaim. And the Israelites served Cushan-Rishathaim for 8 years. Notice what's happened? Boink! Boink! Right? We're just checking these things off, just like Outlook calendar. Right? But when the Israelites cried out to the Lord, boink! Then the Lord raised up a deliverer for the Israelites, who delivered them, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. Boink! The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he judged Israel. And when it says he judged Israel, what it means is that he put Israel into a balance. Right? Things are out of balance now because they're enslaved. So it's not that he judges Israel by saying, you're guilty or something like this. Judging Israel is not necessarily a bad thing for Israel. It means rescuing them, in a sense, at this point. So he judged Israel, and this is how he did it. He went out to war.